Morning students. Morning students. In the previous classes related to digestive system, we have seen how the food substances will be digested in our body. Carbohydrate digestion, protein digestion, fat digestion, and how the fats are absorbed, how the proteins and carbohydrates are absorbed in digested form. What are the different types of disorders related to digestive system? And I said to make one tabular form related to vitamins. So these things you have to remember. And finally, when we understood the complex food materials are digested into simplest forms in digestive system, where that simplest forms must reach, where they should go. It may be amino acid or monosaccharide or fatty acids and glycerol. They must reach the cytoplasm of each and every cell in our body. Because the extraction of, liberation of energy from that micronutrients takes place inside the cell. For that purpose, we have blood as medium. The blood will transport that substances to each and every cell. Fine. Now, after entering into the cell, from the digested food, how we get energy? This is very important. For extracting energy, we are taking food. We are digesting the food in digestive system. And finally, the digested food entered into the cell. Inside the cell, how to get energy from that nutrients? Just think. Now the digested food is inside the cytoplasm. The cell must get that energy from that digested food. It may be glucose, it may be fatty acid, or it may be amino acid. You know very well, in the absence of oxygen, oxidation of food takes place. Oxidation of food is a nice example for catabolic activity. In metabolism, in the early classes, I explained, in the metabolism there are two types of activities. It may be catabolism or anabolism. Catabolic activity is nothing but breaking of large substances into smallest forms. Digestion is also catabolic activity. So now, in the presence of oxygen, if oxygen is present, in the presence of oxygen, the digested food or nutrients will undergo complete oxidation. Complete oxidation. So, in breakdown of or in breaking of that nutrients, presence of oxygen will help to complete the process. So we get more energy. We get more energy in the presence of oxygen. Absence of oxygen, where O2 is absent, the oxidation process will be incomplete. So the amount of energy which is liberated will be very less. What you understood? In the presence of oxygen, we get more energy from the same food material. In the absence of oxygen, we get less energy from the same substrate. So that means, as highly evolved organisms, human beings or any higher animal, they prefer the first type of oxidation. So in the presence of oxidation, in the presence of oxygen, that amount of energy which is liberated will be more. That's why higher animals will conduct this type of oxidation. Oxidation of food. Oxidation of food, getting energy is called as respiration. That is respiration. So what is respiration? Oxidation of food substances, liberation of energy is called as respiration. Where the respiration is happening? Inside the cell. Now here two types of extraction of energy is there. One is in the presence of oxygen, that is called as aerobic respiration. In the absence of oxygen, less energy is released from that incomplete breakdown of food material. That is called as anaerobic respiration. So there are two types of respirations in organisms. Animals, we can say directly microorganisms which survive in areas where oxygen is not available. That type of organisms will show the second type of respiration, because their body is adapted to break the food materials incompletely to get that energy whichever is possible. But higher animals, they will take that oxygen to all the cells. Then in the presence of oxygen, the food substances will give more energy. So what you understood now? Two types of respirations are there in organisms, living organisms. One is aerobic respiration, another one is anaerobic respiration. So now, if you take simplest forms, protozoans, simplest forms of animals, unicellular animals. So in unicellular organisms, the organism, you take amoeba. This organism is having simplest organization. There is no tissue. The entire body is a single cell. This is the nucleus. This is the cytoplasm. And the plasma membrane, that is a covering membrane of the body, it is contacting the external medium. It may be water or air. So now, in the surroundings, we can find presence of oxygen which is dissolved in the water. And throughout the plasma membrane, it is contacting with that oxygen. Through any point or any area, the oxygen will diffuse into the cytoplasm. So this amoeba will avail that oxygen which enters into the body throughout the surface of that plasma membrane. So it is very easy for amoeba to collect oxygen from the external medium. Now, this entry of oxygen into the cytoplasm is happening through simple diffusion. So just the diffusion is enough to provide oxygen for amoeba. That is not only for amoeba, any unicellular organism. There is no difficulty in taking of oxygen to the cytoplasm. You understood? Just there is a simplest medium or barrier in between the oxygen and cytoplasm, that is plasma membrane. Through the plasma membrane, you know very well, that is selectively permeable plasma membrane. So through that oxygen will enter. At the same time, from this cytoplasm, CO2 will exit. So the CO2 will move out, oxygen will move in. This diffusion is helping in respiration for amoeba or any unicellular organism. So one thing you understood, in primitive organisms, in very primitive organisms like protozoans, poriferans, we can see the role of diffusion in respiration. But you may get one doubt. Why can't we take that oxygen to all the cells of the body through diffusion itself in our body? You imagine, in our body, how many cells are present? Not one, trillions of cells are present. Some cells are very deeply present in the body. So that cells are not exposed to the external environment. So that's why we need some special or specialized organs to carry that oxygen from the external medium into the deeper cells. If we depend upon this diffusion for oxygen, it may take some hours for diffusing of oxygen from the outer surface of the skin up to the heart or the intestine or some other organs. So that much time is not present. That cell must get oxygen every fraction of second. That oxygen must be available for the cells. So that's why in our body there are some specialized organs. That organs are coordinated to form one system in which we can see the transportation of gases and the provision of oxygen to the cells will be very simple and easy. So that system, group of organs in our body called as respiratory system. So in that respiratory system in our body, you know very well which organs will help in exchange of gases, means lungs. So lungs are respiratory organs in our body. That respiration is called as pulmonary respiration. So pulmonary respiration, in pulmonary respiration, lungs are the important respiratory organs. Respiratory organs in the sense exchange of gases takes place. The blood will take that oxygen to all the cells of the body. The same blood will take CO2 from all the cells of the body to lungs. So you cannot expect the same lungs in all animals. In some animals, for example, earthworm, we can find skin as respiratory organ. Through the skin, exchange of gases takes place. We call that respiration as cutaneous respiration. Cutaneous respiration. And I think you studied in your high school about cockroach. The cockroach are most of the insects which are present in arthropoda. They have trachea for tracheal system. Here trachea. Trachea is inside the body. So through that tubes and tubules, that external oxygen will reach to all the cells of the body. So other than these, in aquatic organisms like fishes and larval stages of amphibians, they are completely aquatic. In that aquatic forms, gills are present. The gills will help in exchange of gases between the water and the blood. That's why this type of respiration is called as branchial respiration. Branchial. So in different animals, we can see different respiratory organs. In unicellular organisms, we cannot expect organ because that total body is made of a single cell. So in that type of animals, we can find only diffusion without any specialized structure or cell organelle. Oxygen will enter into the cytoplasm through diffusion. In other animals, some animals have lungs for respiration, that is pulmonary. Some animals have skin as respiratory organ, cutaneous respiration, trachea, tracheal system, and gills, branchial system. So now, in this, different modes of exchange of gases. Ultimately, oxygen will enter into the medium or the fluid of the body, which takes that oxygen to all the cells. First thing is, atmospheric oxygen must enter into the blood. That needs exchange. That exchange takes place through different organs. Once if the oxygen entered into the blood of that animal, that blood will transport that oxygen to all the cells. Now inside the cell, oxidation must happen. That is the final process where energy is liberated. Which is that final process, final phase, that is respiration or oxidation of food inside the cytoplasm of the cell. For that purpose, these organs must help for the exchange of gases. So now you understood. Okay, now I took that oxygen into my cell, every cell of my body. After that, in oxidation, energy is liberated. I am taking the help of aerobic respiration, so I will get more energy. How I will store that energy in my body? That is, in our body, ADP, you know very well, adenosine diphosphate. So diphosphate, di means two. Two phosphates will be there. So when energy is available, whenever oxidation takes place, at that time energy is released. That released energy, some amount will be released in the form of heat, and some amount will help in binding that inorganic phosphate to ADP. So that energy, whichever is liberated in oxidation process, that energy helps in binding this inorganic phosphate to ADP. Then we can find the formation of ATP. So you know ATP is called as the currency of cell. So whenever ATP is present in my body, that ATP will help me in giving energy. So that ATP will provide energy for me. How it will provide? This is reversible. Now whenever I need energy, when ATP is forming, when energy is available, when energy is released by oxidation process. Now whenever I need energy, at that time I have to split that, I have to terminate that phosphate, terminal phosphate. At that time, whichever energy is stored in that bond, that energy will be useful for doing some work. So that's why ADP will convert into ATP, ATP will again convert into ADP. When ATP converts into ADP, at that time energy will be released for our requirement. When energy is available, plenty of energy is available, at that time ADP will convert into ATP. So now you understood. This terminal phosphate is very important. So for that binding, we need energy. For breaking, energy will be released when it is separated. Right? So now in our body or in any animal, we can see different phases of respiration. If I ask any student, what is the definition for respiration? Simply they will say taking of oxygen and elimination of CO2. That is not the actual respiration. The actual definition for respiration is oxidation of food and releasing of energy is called as respiration. So now let us see what are the 5 different phases in respiration process. Number 1, intake of oxygen, intake of oxygen and elimination of CO2. Intake of oxygen and elimination of CO2. You have to listen this properly. Intake of oxygen means from where? From the external medium. It may be water. Aquatic animals will live inside the water. In that case, the external condition, medium, is water. We are living on the earth. So terrestrial animals, for terrestrial animals, the external medium is air, atmospheric air. From that atmospheric air, when we try to pull that air into our body, our nose will help. Through the nose, the atmospheric air will enter into our body. Slowly that will reach lungs. So this process of intake of air from the external medium into respiratory organ. Lung is nothing but respiratory organ. So intake of oxygen from the external medium into respiratory organ and elimination of CO2 from respiratory organ into external medium. This is called as breathing. Breathing. So what is breathing? It is also called as ventilation. It is also called as ventilation. So breathing is intake of oxygen, elimination of CO2. It is happening in between the external environment, atmosphere, and respiratory organ. Now immediately after that, now due to breathing process, oxygen entered into lungs. Oxygen entered into lungs. From the lungs, the oxygen must enter into the blood. At the same time, from the blood, CO2 must enter into the lungs. So the exchange of gases between respiratory organ and blood, that is called as external respiration. External respiration. What is external respiration? Exchange of gases between respiratory organ and blood. This is external respiration. That is happening inside the lungs. But we are using one term, external. Here some students will get doubt. Why we have to use that external word for lungs? Lungs are internal organs. What type of air will reach lungs? Without any change, whatever the proportion of gases are present in the air, atmospheric air, in the room, whatever atmospheric air is present, the same proportions will enter into the lungs. That's why inside the lungs we can see the same atmospheric air. It may be pressure, it may be proportions of gases. That will be same. That's why we used to call that as external respiration. Due to this external respiration, the oxygen entered into blood because exchange happened. The blood received oxygen from the lungs. Now, that blood must take that oxygen from the lungs to all parts of the body. The same blood must take that CO2 from different parts to lungs. So here, transportation of gases. Transportation of gases. In this transportation of gases, both oxygen transportation and CO2 transportation, we have to study. Right? So, one thing, in this transportation, oxygen reached tissue. From where? Lungs. In this transportation, CO2 reached lungs from tissue. So that oxygen transportation means from lungs to tissue, CO2 transportation means from tissue to lungs. Now, fourth one. Again, one more exchange of gases. That exchange of gases takes place between that blood and cells, or we can say ECF and cells. So that is called as internal respiration. Internal respiration. So in this internal respiration, the exchange of gases between the blood and cells. This is internal respiration. Due to internal respiration, oxygen reached the cell now. CO2 came out into the blood from cell. Now, the cells already in digestive system, you understood, digested food reached the cell. Now, oxygen also reached that cell in respiration. So, both oxygen and digested food, both are present in cytoplasm. Now, what else? Oxidation of food takes place. That happens inside the cytoplasm. So, we call that as cellular respiration. So, in this cellular respiration, oxidation of food substances takes place. In this cellular respiration, liberation of energy takes place. So, this is the final step in which oxygen is released, energy is released. So, for cellular respiration to occur, all these four steps must happen. Otherwise, oxygen cannot reach the cells for cellular respiration. So, for this purpose, in these 5 phases, we can understand the respiration perfectly. Okay? So, one thing I will repeat again. In respiration process in our body, first phase is breathing. In this breathing, we will take the atmospheric air up to the lungs and we will eliminate the CO2 from the lungs to external condition. Second phase, external respiration, exchange of gases between the respiratory organ and blood. So exactly the inward movement of oxygen from the lungs to blood and outward movement of CO2 from the blood into lungs takes place. That is external respiration. Now the blood must transport that gases. Again, in this transportation of gases, we will study that oxygen will be transported in how many methods. CO2 will be transported in how many methods? Totally, there are 2 methods in which oxygen is transported by the blood. CO2 will be transported by the blood in 3 methods. So that we can understand in detail. Internal respiration, this is exchange of gases between the blood and cells. Now, in this process, what is happening? Oxygen will move from the blood into cell. CO2 will move from the cell into blood. Then, cellular respiration. Here, oxidation of food takes place. Here, this is catabolic activity where energy is released. Okay. So, with this, we can conclude that process of respiration. Now, to understand breathing in detail, I will explain. When we try to take the atmospheric air into the lungs must provide extra space. You know, the wind or the air will move from high pressure to low pressure. That you can understand. It is very simple concept. From high pressure to low pressure area, the air will move in the form of wind. So that means if I want to take the air up to my lungs, in the lungs we have to maintain low pressure. In the room, in the atmosphere, pressure must be more. Inside our lungs, there must be low pressure, then only we can take air up to the lungs. For that purpose, we cannot change the atmospheric air pressure, but we can change the pressure inside the lungs, because in our body, the two lungs are present like this. They are present in the thoracic cavity. These are the two lungs. We can see one diaphragm in between the thorax and abdomen. Now, in this thoracic region, this is the thoracic cavity. In this thoracic cavity, along with lungs, we can find heart, but we are not focusing on that organs. Now, if we try to expand the size of the lung, if the size of the lung is expanded, what happens to the pressure inside the lungs? That will decrease. If the space, extra space is created without change in the quantity of air, the pressure of the air will come down. At that time, this will become low pressure, and externally in the atmosphere, it will be high comparatively to the pressure inside the lung. So whenever we have to take that oxygen into the lungs, we have to expand the size of the lung in all dimensions. Otherwise, to expel the CO2 out, we have to create or build up high pressure in this lungs. At that time, if the lung becomes smaller, at that time the pressure will increase. So the CO2 will be expelled out. So that is a simple mechanism in which the size of the lung will be expanded or constricted. So due to these two changes in the size of lungs, we are able to breathe. Okay, so now that's why this breathing can be divided into two phases. Number one is taking of oxygen into the lungs. Number two is elimination of CO2. So taking of oxygen, that is called as inspiration. The second one is expiration. Inspiration and expiration. Some people will call it as inhalation and exhalation. These two are the terms used for the phases in breathing. Or sometimes we can call that inspiration as breathing in, expiration as breathing out. So through this breathing in and breathing out, this ventilation will be completed. Sometimes, have you heard about artificial ventilation? If the person is unable to breathe naturally, at that time with one device, ventilator, that oxygen will be provided forcefully to the patient. So that's why that patient is under ventilator. We used to call like that. So that's why the breathing is nothing but ventilation. Okay, naturally we have that ability to breathe in and breathe out. So for that increase or decrease the dimensions of the lungs, what must happen? One thing I will tell you, the thoracic cavity in which the lungs are present, that thoracic cavity is airtight cavity. It is very compact. There is no opening to the thoracic cavity. If we make any opening to the thoracic cavity, the lungs will collapse. So they cannot show that expansions and constrictions. Okay, so that's why the increase in the size of lung or reducing in the size of lung depends upon the thoracic cavity. We can see the expansion and constriction of thoracic cavity at the time of breathing. The total thorax will expand and constrict. So with the help of changes in the thoracic cavity, we can change the size of the lungs. So for changing the thoracic cavity, total thoracic cavity, what we have to do? In the thorax, important soft organs are present like lungs and heart. So to protect all that vital organs, we have skeletal structures. Which skeletal structures we have in the thoracic cavity? One is chest bone in the ventral side. Dorsal side we have vertebral column, and the lateral sides we have ribs. So completely we call that skeletal structures present in thorax as rib cage. So inside the rib cage we can find lungs. We have to think about skeletal structures before thinking to expand the chest cavity, because they are skeletal structures. How to move the bones present in chest cavity, then only the dimensions of the thorax will increase or decrease. So for that purpose, muscles, you know very well, in tissues you studied, any movement in the body is brought by muscle contraction. So the bones may be helping, but that bones will move with the help of muscles, right? So what are the two different types of muscles present in thoracic cavity? What are the different bones which will move to increase or decrease the thoracic cavity? That I will explain in tomorrow's class. Thank you.